Let's go to Clemson. It's the first time we've done this all year. Miami at Clemson, the Clemson Tigers. I try as hard as I can to pronounce the S, but the Z still comes out. So Clem minus 14. Saturday, 7:30 Eastern kickoff on ABC. Have you noticed, maybe you haven't, I have, how terrified people seem to be to even entertain the notion of Clemson losing a football game? I don't know what the fear is. It's like something's hiding under your bed, and if you dare predict Clemson to lose a game, and they don't, they just rip someone's throat out and hold it over their head, and the blood drips down over their face. It's like, what's going to happen? You don't get to watch the games anymore? The sun will come up the next day. It's okay to say Miami's good. It's okay to say, hey, they got a shot in this game. It's okay to say that. It's also perfectly normal to think Clemson's going to win the game. So let's dive in. Let's tell you what we think here. Virginia played Clemson last week. Don't lie to me. Most of you didn't watch that game. Most of you saw a box score. You saw the highlights. A buddy texted you at like 10:28 and said, hey, dude, Virginia's doing kind of okay against Clemson. And that is basically a summary of your viewership of the Clemson versus Virginia game. I fit that description too. I didn't watch much of it live. There were other games on. However, I have, since I don't have anything else to do, they just pay me to watch football, I have gone back and watched that game. The thing that obviously stands out to you, whether you watched it or you just looked at a piece of paper in the box score, is Brennan Armstrong, quarterback for Virginia. He had 270 yards passing. What caught my eye a little bit more as it pertains to the Miami game is the 89 rush yards he had, I think, on 22 carries. It's not the greatest yards per carry average in the world, but it's not nothing either. So the reason you look at that is because you understand D'Eriq King in Miami, the biggest threat they have potentially to leverage into an upset special is, well, he can use his legs. He's dynamic in multiple ways. He's a true dual threat quarterback. Okay, so if Brennan Armstrong did it, why can't D'Eriq King do it? I don't think that's the craziest thing in the world to suggest. Here's what I do think is probably a little bit overlooked as we look at highlights and B-roll of Miami running backs in their own zip code running out of the backfield against Louisville. That was a fun time. Here's one thing I think we've overlooked. Virginia's not a bad football team. That's the one thing I think we've overlooked in all this. You think about Virginia as, something equivalent of what you find on the bottom of your shoe after you go hiking, and that is not what Virginia is. Contenders, they are not. Trash, they are not. Somewhere in between the contender and trash spectrum, we find Virginia just a little bit closer to contender status than trash status. So 41-23 was Clemson's struggle game, using air quotes there. I think they'll take it. Brent Venables also rarely has his defense made a fool of 2 weeks in a row. And it's a stretch to say they were made a fool of last week. It's very relative. When do you ever see them have two down performances in a row? If you say down, let's use the point spread as a garden variety metric. How many times do you see them play down? 2 weeks in a row. Because they did last week, according to that spread. I wish we would have taken it because our system said to. I was scared. I was the guy who was scared to entertain it last week. So D'Eriq King, going back to the Miami quarterback here, they are not going to allow him to run around on them. They are not going to allow him to beat them with his legs. They have the ability. They have plenty of talent. It's one of the best defenses in the country. It's the best defensive coordinator in the country. They possess the ability, anytime they want to take away an element of your offense. Whether you want them to take it away or not, they're going to take it away. What would you take away from Miami? Would you take away the scramble ability? Would you take away the quarterback's ability to extend drives on you? Or would you make him stay in the pocket and find out if the whispers and rumors out of Miami's fall camp were true? And those rumors and whispers, I was doing the Miami podcast with Ivans the other day, and we were kind of talking about the practice reports early on. I remember seeing out of Miami camp down there, and the reviews about D'Eriq King were, he's everything we thought he was going to be, but here's what we're really surprised by, his ability to throw the ball in classic passing situations. I'm not talking about on the run. I'm talking about standing in the pocket and ripping one 15 yards across the middle. They said they were seeing that in practice. We haven't seen that to a large degree during the season so far in competitive there hasn't been a whole lot of competition here yet, especially relative to what they're going to see Saturday. Well, we got to see that Saturday. Got to see it. Got to see them victimize some very talented but green players in Clemson's defensive front, but they have to be able to throw the ball too. Because Brent Venables is willing to look at him and say, listen, D'Eriq King, if you rip us up, man, if you throw for 360 against us, we'll tip our cap to you. We don't think you can do it. Flat out, we don't think you can do it. And the more you do it, the more risks you have to take, and I trust my defense eventually to confuse you enough to make it be the difference on the scoreboard. So how many firsts can Miami throw at Clemson? Remember the blueprint here. We're going to talk disproportionately about Miami because Clemson's favored for a reason. It's very easy to talk about why they're favored. We try and find the path to the upset, and then we'll give you our prediction at the end. How many firsts does Miami possess that they can show Clemson, that Clemson will not have seen so far, and maybe they don't have a data point they can look back on in the past and say, okay, to handle this, we need to look back to that and see how we did. Well, I'll tell you two of them. One of them's name is Will Mallory. The other one's name is Brevin Jordan. That's a pair of tight ends they have at Miami, the likes of which I don't think you have in a 1-2 fashion anywhere else in the ACC, safe to say, and you really don't have it anywhere else in the country. Those are really good tight ends. They're versatile. They can be inliners. They can be 3rd down and 7 options. They can flex on you. So they've got a lot of versatility there. And Miami is not necessarily deep with a ton of true X-type receivers. They don't have a superstar guy in the slot that's a sure future first rounder, but they do have that combo there. Along with Cameron Harris and guys in the backfield, Derek King himself is a threat, but I'm thinking about 3rd down situations, and I'm thinking about how they move the chains. How do they stay on the field, thus keeping Trevor Lawrence off the field? That's it. Using those tight ends. And you got, again, some young guys in that Clemson front. Maybe you give them looks, especially on 3rd down, they haven't seen before, and you also may just trust your physical advantage. Those two guys are big, man. I went to watch Miami play Florida on the field to start the season last year. Those tight ends are impressive. Brevin Jordan's a monster. Weidermeyer at A&M is a guy we're going to talk about in a second. Pitts is a guy at Florida, a little bit different body type. There's some impressive tight ends in college football right now. Miami's got 2 of them. So that, as I said, plus quarterback runs on 3rd down, you would hope that that gives you a little bit of an edge there. And maybe you also find an edge in your special teams department because they got one of the best kicker and punter combinations at Miami that you'll find anywhere in the country too. So we talked about Brent Venables. Well, what about on the other side? Manny Diaz looks across the ball, and he looks across the way, and he obviously sees Trevor Lawrence. If Trevor Lawrence beats you, Trevor Lawrence beats you. But if you've watched Clemson so far this year, they are disproportionately heavily dependent upon Travis Etienne. If you're going to depend on a guy not named Trevor Lawrence, that's who you want to depend on. I mean, he came back for a reason. Surprised a lot of us. He came back for a reason. He is obviously their leading rusher. He is one of their leading receivers. So if you're going to focus on taking something away or limiting, I don't know if you take him away or limiting, I mean, that's where the attention is going to be. So someone needs to pop at the receiver position outside of who already has. They need a 3rd option there. They really do not have the kind of depth they've had at that position in years past. They know that. I guarantee you they're shaking their head as I say it. Because if you follow Clemson, that's all anyone talks about. Justin Ross, not there this year. You don't have those guys you normally had. They know. I mean, they also know they have guys you don't know about yet. Hopefully you know about 1 or 2 of them this coming Saturday that you didn't before. So, all about swimming. We always go back to this metaphor. Anytime someone's trying to break in and ascend to the next rung of the ladder, it's all about the pool. Miami is in the pool now. In order to swim, you got to be in the pool. But Miami is still hung out in the shallow end. Okay, they've gotten their feet on the ground. But as was the case, anytime you were a kid and you were growing up, and am I 5 feet tall? Am I 5 feet 2? How far can I go into this deep end and keep my head above water? Well, there's only one way to find out. And so you tiptoe your little way. Swimmies are off now. This is big boy time. We've got to learn to swim on our own. Swimmies are off. And then you start walking off that shallow ledge, and it starts getting deeper, and you just creep, and you creep, and you creep. And so you beat UAB, and then you go on the road, another step. You take care of Louisville, and then you come back home, and you yawn and take care of Florida State. But now it's up to your nose. You're kind of tilting your head, and you draw that last breath of air, and then you step far enough to where you can't touch the bottom anymore. That's when you find out if you can swim. Miami's taking the step Saturday. They're going to find out if they can swim. There are a lot of aspects of this program that have been overhauled already, coaching and player. There are a lot of aspects of this team they think they can trust, but they don't fully know if they can trust. All football teams I make analogous to dams, and every dam has cracks in it. The water pressure is going to get applied across the entire dam for Miami Saturday. And they're going to find out. We got cracks. Everyone does. Clemson does too. How big are they? How many of them do we have? And can we still hold that water back enough even with our flaws exposed? Can we swim? Can we hold the water back? Water is so powerful, people. It's so powerful that I don't need anything other than it to explain college football. Fortunate, because water's a whole lot easier to figure out than zone blocking concepts sometimes. So, Colin, let's talk about our game capsule, shall we? Clemson is a 14-point favorite. That's floated up north of 14, but at least this one stayed still for us a little while today. Hey, how about this? We had Georgia, Tennessee. We had that line at 10 for our own in-house model. We've got Clemson as a shorter favorite, too. So, do you believe in Miami? Well, apparently our model does. What do I think about this game? I'm doing the same thing I just did with the Georgia-Tennessee line. I see no reason to differentiate. I do not believe that Clemson is about to run away and hide offensively in this game. As much as there are firsts that Clemson's going to show Miami, the athleticism, the speed, the ability to affect the quarterback, like there are a lot of firsts that Miami will possess, at least for this year's Clemson Tiger team, that they haven't seen yet. And I'm not saying they're about to shut them down by any stretch. It would not surprise me if, for instance, we went into the half with Miami tied or in the lead. That second half, the deep end, though, that again, that's a big-time hurdle. That's akin to seeing Jared Garantano play a mistake-free game for Tennessee. Well, if Miami is able to control the second half of a football game, control the fourth quarter of a football game, when you take Clemson's best punch at home in a meaningful game, obviously, this is not the spring game, then you've earned it. And I don't know that they can necessarily take a step that far. I do think they can be very competitive wire to wire with Clemson. I will take the Tigers to win, but I absolutely will take those 14 points. I'll take Miami to cover. I think they're going to have a really impressive showing, enough to where if they walk out of there with a loss, there are no moral victories in this sport. But really there are. Because if they walk out having lost, I think, 34-27, if you don't feel better about yourself at the end of that day than you did at the beginning of Saturday as a Miami Hurricane fan, I don't know what in the world you've been watching. So we'll take Clemson to win. We'll take Miami to cover the 14.